Georgia opted for neutrality when hostilities broke out between Armenia and Azerbaijan in late September, and is now watching how the Karabakh deals are opening new realities in the region. George Mchedlishvili speaks on Top Talk about the Georgian perspective on the Karabakh war and post-war picture. Good evening, George. Lovely to have you in our video interview series on Karabakh. Today, we're going to talk about the Georgian perspective on the conflict and what type of impact it has had on Georgia. Throughout the 44-day conflict, Georgia retained a firm stance of neutrality, although it could be somehow understandable from Georgian perspective. Many in Azerbaijan did not fully understand and accept this position due to several factors. Moral, as Georgia herself has been suffering from similar problems of secession and occupation. Practical, given Azerbaijan's investments in Georgia. Third, geostrategic, as Azerbaijan, together with Turkey, usually, have been Georgia's key political, military, and economic partners, while Armenia has been simultaneously in the same camp with Russia. What are the main arguments of the Georgian leadership about this position during the conflict, and did the society support this stance?
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation. I want to greet your viewers, numerous viewers, and wish your channel and program every success. So regarding the stance of Georgia, there are several dimensions of Georgia's attitude towards the conflict, the issue. In the first place, this is of course international law, and from the standpoint of international law, Georgia is firmly on the side with Azerbaijan. As you rightly mentioned, Georgia has exactly similar problems, and both countries are, one can say, companions in misfortune in this particular regard, as we had to start our independent life in early 90s from secessionist wars, from IDPs, which was a huge blow to the already battered economies of the after breakup of the Soviet Union. So sentimentally, of course, actually we feel it. And of course, general sense was that what was happening during the 44 days was the righting of the wrong. Generally, like no two ways about it, that practically every Georgian felt that huge injustice that occurred between 92 and 94 with IDPs and with ethnic cleansing and of not only Nagorno-Karabakh proper, but like 7 regions which were primarily populated by Azerbaijanis. Obviously, that is like one dimension, which is international law. And again, so the support of Georgia towards Azerbaijan is also evidenced by permanent voting in the United Nations and other important fora for the return of, for the dignified return of IDPs. In this particular case, Georgia and Azerbaijan had been and will be side by side until the problems are solved completely. That is of official position. Of course, Georgia is firmly in the camp of supporters of territorial integrity and sovereignty of the countries. That's one. Another dimension is more practical and stems from the calculus of the small state. Georgia actually itself wanted I remember myself, I was my middle school years and then early the teenage years in late 80s, early 90s, like during the conflict, there was a way I talked about Georgia might be a mediator, might be an efficient mediator, given that Georgia has significant ethnic minorities, both Armenian and Azerbaijani. Today, there are about 250,000 Armenians, about Azerbaijanis, and 200,000 Armenians. They of course, they have compact pockets of population in Karabakh in the south of Georgia and in Javakheti, southwest, and also they live side by side in Tbilisi. They befriend each other, and well, I have personal friends and friends among themselves, Armenians and Azerbaijanis in Tbilisi. Like no tension had been, and of course, it is very important to preserve that stability of the society. Luckily, there was a near absence near absence of any tension within Georgian society between Azerbaijani and Armenian community. That is important, like, to keep. And also Georgia being weak, small, vulnerable, with two occupied territories in a severed condition, so can ill afford taking sides, because that would incur significant difficulty. Again, you mentioned Armenia being the allies of Russia. Well, luckily, there had been no serious issues between Georgia and Armenia. By the way, in the early 90s, there was an episode when ethnic tensions started in Chabaheti, and actually Armenia intervened to stop it at the time, because, well, practically they realized opening the second front would be like ill affordable. And again, so Georgia provides very important transportation corridor, particularly in the conditions when two longest borders of Armenia are closed for nearly 30 decades. That is an important factor. So Armenian leadership also, sometimes it was, I think it was actually kind of on purpose, some public figures in Armenia, they were taking holidays in Georgia, posting pictures. By the way, they were showing Russia that Russia will not be able to find another site of tension within Georgia. So both countries took that good neighborly relations like very seriously, and of course it would be dangerous for Georgia to take, so for instance, to allow the transportation from Turkey to Azerbaijan, but not from Russia to Armenia. Of course, actually, Russia has a special ring, of course, for every Georgian, and of course, actually, like many initiatives coming from Russia are like blocked in the bud for obvious reasons. But again, so Georgia decided to keep distance in that particular regard. Of course, as I told you, from the standpoint of international law, generally kind of societal reaction was that something right is happening. It was a long overdue. Of course, it also, so many Georgians started to ask questions of how to deal with our own problem. Well, for now, Georgia has firmly chosen the path of negotiations and peaceful resolution. But again, the example that, you know, it hadn't been working for 26 years in the case of Azerbaijan, of course, gives people the other side. I personally do not want that it comes to a similar scenario, but well, we see that international diplomacy like doesn't work well. So these are the most kind of the reasons kind of the Georgia took it with caution because of its own weaknesses and vulnerabilities. But again, general mood of the society was that I told you that, well, the wrong was being righted. You know, even in relatively peaceful times, you know, this situation between Georgia, Armenia, you know, in this, if you take this like South Caucasus Triangle, is like fraught. You remember about a year ago, there was a bust, okay, the monument, the bust of the Georgia-born Armenian who fought in Karabakh on the side of the separatists. Of course, it caused serious uproar, even in peaceful times. Actually, kind of like any gesture, any move is causing like reaction, like a domino effect. That's why, well, it was decided by the Georgian leadership in this particular case. I think it was a right path, like to abstain from direct engagement.
Thank you very much, George, for shedding light on Georgia's position, for your explanation. As part of the Karabakh deal, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia have agreed to unblock regional communication lines, which may definitely influence the geopolitical picture in the South Caucasus. I have read in media that there are fears in Georgia that the country can be left out of the game. Do you think these fears are justified?
I believe that they are justified partially, and again, and I would say strategically. This is not an immediate challenge. Well, transportation equation, of course, had been important for Georgia. Georgia integrated itself pretty organically into the network for about 3 decades. Well, partially also taking advantage of the situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Well, actually, like tactically, strategically. So of course, the evolution of this like Baku-Tbilisi-Ankara axis is important, not only for the countries of the region, but in terms of European energy security, as an alternative like from Russia, and also actually connecting East and West. So we should also like keep in mind that, well, all these Belt and Road and like Chinese initiatives are on hold because of the COVID-19, but again, they might again be revived pretty soon. And again, there was a void for 4 years in the United States. Hopefully, the new administration will renew its interest in the region, which might potentially bring more initiatives, more investments. European Union, again, very hopefully the year 2021 will be the year when the humanity will leave COVID-19 behind. It will have more power, more political will to re-engage in the region. So there are many, the potential of this axis is significant. It might become even bigger. Well, we see that new administration, US administration, will probably soften to a certain extent its attitude towards Iran. Some sanctions might be lifted. And again, Iran might come, of course, very cautiously, of course, in a very limited fashion, but as a more meaningful player in the region. And the recent visit of Iranian foreign minister into the region and Russia, this is also the indication that something might change in this particular regard. So I believe that there will be enough trade, there will be enough transportation flows into the region for every road to take its like fair load, I would say. Yeah, one has to say, so far, Baku-Tbilisi is not actually kind of like fully loaded. There is a potential actually to increase it. It will take time to revive this southern road through the Armenian town, Mehri corridor. Well, and again, a significant portion of freight which comes from Azerbaijan goes to Poti anyway. So therefore, Georgia will have its place. There is a time to think about it so far. Well, again, this time should be used wisely. It shouldn't be wasted. But I think actually kind of there is a time frame of 2 to 3 years. And also there should be a hope that the global trade will finally revive. And I told you like the China factor, Iran factor, and US, the West factor might also actually kind of like bring new economic life to the region. So I believe that hopefully if peace prevails, if like everything is fine, like within normality, so there will be like enough trade and enough freight and loads for every road. And again, sorry, the new initiative, which is of course generally kind of like strategically good, because trade is, of course, it's not a guarantee against like warfare, because sometimes actually like hatreds and attitudes like run much deeper. But of course, they diminish the chance of the conflagration. But again, it takes time. So far, political situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan probably at the moment doesn't allow these corridors like to be revived. Turkey's factor is also important, because well, Turkey also might stand to benefit. But again, so far the relationship between Armenia and Turkey are not that promising. Well, there was a certain, I would say, okay, like honeymoon is of course actually an overstatement, like the attempted rapprochement in 2008, 2009, 2010.
Diplomacy.
Yes, this football diplomacy. Today, these times are gone. And again, it will take time and effort and political will to bring the countries to that situation, to that attitude.
How does the Georgian side perceive the deployment of the Russian troops in Karabakh? Because I've read in media that Georgia are now being encircled by the Russian forces. Does it influence Tbilisi's westward aspirations, limiting its maneuvers, or pushing it more toward transatlantic security space?
Well, it remains to be seen how it develops. Last week, NDI, National Democratic Institute, stationed in Georgia, released the polls, the results of the polls, which show that Georgian society overwhelmingly supports westward integration. Kind of the figures for support of EU and NATO integration stand at high 70 percentage point, high 70s, and sometimes low 80s. So one can say that overwhelming majority of the society so far is like West oriented. Well, on the tactical level, of course, it is good generally today that, well, there is no more bloodshed. Yes, one can argue whether, like, strategically it could be continued and whether it was on the right time and why it happened, whether there was actually some elements of pressure and what is, I would say, kind of the kitchen of that, like the diplomacy, what was happening actually kind of behind the scenes. But the fact is that people no more die. That is good by itself, okay, in its own right, that there are no civilian casualties, there are not young people dying on both sides. On a tactical level, it is good, there's no more warfare, and there is a force in this case, like Russia, which so far like guarantees it. Yes, of course, one can understand that Russia tries to take advantage of the situation. Well, Russia is not happy that Turkey became the new actor in the region by supporting Azerbaijan in a more meaningful fashion than rhetorically, as was the case before September. This is actually one calculus. And of course, for Georgia, which doesn't have diplomatic relations with Russia, and given the fact why diplomatic ties were severed in 2008, the presence of Russian, well, basically troops, we're going to call it peacekeepers, but they can like take off helmets very soon. Like it takes few moments. And unfortunately, the Georgians have seen it firsthand between 1993 and 2008, when Russian peacekeepers were stationed in Abkhazia, and oftentimes, I would say, complemented the peacekeeper function with some other functions, which was virtually actually kind of like this like gradual de facto occupation and I would say dismemberment of Georgia, which, well, unfortunately later was like was followed by this like de jure recognition of Abkhazia as an independent state. Again, so obviously kind of like the fact that these peacekeepers are Russians like cannot but unnerve Georgia. So given that strategic goal of Russia not to allow the region to develop politically and become and wish to become the part of the Western civilization. It's not about being just a member of NATO, European Union, just becoming more democratic, becoming more pluralistic, becoming more modern. So, so Russia sees its main goal in the South Caucasus. Not, of course, actually, I'm far from this idea that Russia wants to revive the Soviet Union. Of course, all three republics will have their symbols of like of the sovereignty, but it's about like domestic development. It's about the country becoming like self-reliant, becoming modern, becoming like true country of the 21st century. With such a heavy Russian presence, it is near impossible. And of course, well, in this particular situation, Georgians are worried that Russia strengthens too much in this South Caucasus. Again, my personal hope, as well as that of many Georgians, that the void that existed for 4 years in the United States and the overall situation like with COVID will subside, and the West, European Union and United States, and in the first place, will participate more in the region, which for me is a guarantee that Russia will not be the only player. And again, economically, to revive the region, so probably there is some assistance from the European Union, at least like will be needed. So there is a chance that Russia will not be the only one again. So I potentially believe, probably not with the current leadership of Russia, so that Russia can be a positive, constructive player, not in its current shape, not with its current, I would say, calculus, not with this current mindset of the leadership. But again, situations change, countries' political face also like might change, and more meaningful presence of the West is a guarantee that it will happen sooner rather than later.
Thank you, George. Another question is related to the Caucasus platform announced by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Baku. This platform, which is supposed to consist of 6 countries, was first rejected by the Georgian authorities, which were against any framework that would include Russia. But it was later embraced and even promoted by Georgian President Salome Zurabishvili. To what extent is the Georgian leadership taking this initiative seriously.
Again, the absence of diplomatic relations and the fact that two regions of Georgia are occupied by Russia and recognized as independent states excludes meaningful and fully fledged cooperation and membership with the same organization. So, well, as long as the initiative is not the formal organization with the institutional, I would say, kind of like the mechanisms, it is remotely possible, but not at this present stage, I believe. Also, well, that so far it has been just an initiative. So I guess many conditions should be fulfilled in order for this initiative like to gain some flesh on this on the skeleton. Again, I had mentioned previously the relations between Armenia and Turkey. So far they are in such a condition that it is near impossible like to join in the in a meaningful cooperation. Again, well, there is no diplomatic ties between Armenia and Turkey, Armenia and Azerbaijan. So I guess this initiative is, I would say, kind of like strategic goal, but still a lot needs to be done, and a lot needs to be changed until this initiative reaches a fruition. So maybe, hopefully, situation between Georgia and Russia also, again, it's a of course, actually kind of uphill battle. It is very optimistic outlook, but within several years, within maybe a decade, some change might occur. And therefore, in principle, if Russia is the country which recognizes territorial integrity of Georgia, there will be no objection about this Russia being present in the region and wanting to promote peace and stability. If Russia wants to promote stability in the region, which it should want given its own situation in North Caucasus, because it's generally in the strategic, it should be part of strategic calculus of Russia to have meaningful, fully fledged region in the south, because it next to its very painful underbelly, North Caucasus, and having the region, which is also unstable, having the region which is, and the country like Georgia, which is so anti-Russian, obviously doesn't help Russia to solve its own goal. Well, hopefully that Russia will, maybe not, again, not in its current leadership, so there will be Russia which recalibrates priorities and understands that cooperative Georgia is better than Georgia, which like almost collectively like hates Russian leadership and Russia as a state. Of course, actually, it doesn't actually extend to the people. Russian tourists welcome here as tourists, as friends. And by the way, this is actually part of this second track diplomacy, because yeah, personally, well, a couple of times, thanks to me, thanks to like my friends, they do change their minds regarding actually kind of Georgia and regarding the attitudes and policies of their own country. So again, these relations will develop at some point, but not at the present stage.
Thank you very much, George, for sharing your valuable thoughts, for this interesting conversation, enjoyable conversation.
Okay, thank you for having me. Bye.